I would like to ask each of you is, what do you see as the most important impact of the IDD? You can also say it has no impact, and that's fine. But I started with you, Paul, yesterday, so I will not start with you now, so that you have the possibility to reflect. But maybe, Michael, what do you think is the most important change that the IDD brought about?
Well, I think it's transparency in remuneration of sales channels. In Germany, we chose to be as intransparent as possible, sorry to say. And looking at Holland, I'm not sure if full transparency would be the opposite, but I think this is really discussed. And in that sense, I think it's the first time consumers also taken serious, that they know what 10, 15, 20% means in monetary terms, or what 20 euro in percent is on a 100 euro premium. So that will be changing, because it will go into a competition, and this is the lack in the agents and broker markets, that the price, which is a competitive element for almost all normal contracts, has been taken out. And I think this is the price for the services. And I think this is the big change, and it will be interesting to see if there will be diversification in that going forward, or if we will have a European frame.
Okay. Paul, what would you think? Would you agree that transparency is the biggest change?
I think is one of the most important thing that IDDs bring for brokers, but also I think that for Romania, I think that also one of the most important things is that by application of needed demand test and other things, I think that our brokers will apply what in bank is calling know your customer. As you know, Romania is a MTPL-based insurance market, and unfortunately the behavior of the sellers, let me put in quotes, of the sellers of MTPL, it's quite ignorant about the real needs of the customers. I think that even at the beginning we together we saw as a kind of bureaucratic approach of the customers. This will change a little bit, and more and more brokers I discuss with about this thing agree that is a chance for them to develop and diversify their portfolio, together with bring also insurers, other customers, not only this very easy to sell product.
Okay. Very interesting. Michael, in Austria, I know this was a big thing, the introduction of the insurance distribution directive. So what would you see from an Austrian point of view as the main impact?
And particularly from an insurer's perspective, actually. And I would say it's the amount of documentation. The amount of documentation, which I think that maybe brokers would see it the same way, is to a certain extent disproportionate to the value added for consumers. And this I would see as a very important point.
Let me then move on to another issue which is linked to that of transparency. Do you believe, Michael, that the customer is interested in knowing how much money the intermediary is making?
Well, it's a supported question, I would say. So probably most of the time you don't think the same. If you buy a jeans in a store, you also don't think, if I pay 65 euro, how much will stay with the retailer, how much will go to the lady knitting. But if you're asking supported, yes, people would be interested. So I'd be interested, yes? I think so. I think so.
Yeah. Would that be the same in Austria? Would people be interested?
I would say that in Austria, but maybe also in the CEE region, what I was already mentioning yesterday, consumers would particularly be interested in not paying for advice. I think like in markets like Austria, but also CEE, markets, I think they're, from customer side, it's expected to have it for free, the advice. And I think it would be very dangerous to let them pay, because this would apparently lead to less advice or no advice. And I was also referring yesterday basically to the fact where we have a certain social dimension. If those people who cannot afford advice cannot profit from this, and I think this would go in a completely different direction than this was intended by the legislator.
Paul, what do you think?
I think that we have to go from the simplest buyer of a product, go up to the corporate level. I think that buyers like me, including me in this,
You are a
until
consumer?
now, yes, I'm a consumer of different products. We're not very interested in how much the broker is taking out of the price I'm paying, but to provide the right product, or I'm a more conscious, let's say, buyer, but for them it's only to find the right product. On the other side, the more you go up to the companies and corporate, they are very interested in how to structure the full cost of the premium, and also they are interested how much the broker will receive from this. I think this is a matter of time, because also now brokers are obliged to inform how much is the commission taken out. So in some years, I cannot make a prediction, but in some years this will discipline a little bit the brokers, and maybe not with intervention by the authority. Sometimes if you put stress on the market, you may distort, because you really don't know what's going on between the buyer and the seller.
Now this may be interesting also for the audience. When we were negotiating this directive, this issue about transparency, about the fee giving to the intermediary, was a crucial issue in the discussions. And many member states in the European Union were of the belief that commissions needed to be abolished, because it was presumed that the people receiving a commission were not giving advice. They were just collecting the commission. And that's why in these countries, commissions are often prohibited today, and the brokers or the intermediaries, they would then collect a fee for advice that they give to the consumer. Now, what has happened in a country like the United Kingdom, for instance, which has prohibited these commissions, is that they have now seen that there is no more advice, because only the rich people can afford to to pay a fee, whilst the general public does not want to pay for advice, and therefore does no longer get advice. And that is the reason why the system in the UK is now also being changed. This is only to show you how these things are interrelated and sometimes very complex, and we have to see how the market evolves. Another issue that I wanted to talk about, because this may be relevant here also in Romania, is how the IDD might have an impact on, particularly on the small intermediary firms. Do you think that it will make their life more complex? Will they disappear? It was certainly a worry, and it's one of the reasons that in 2020 the Commission will have to look again at the IDD to see whether the market is going against the small intermediary firms, so as to eventually then change the directive again. So I'll start again with Michael.
And if it's that I can comment also, because I may be misunderstood before, the pure advice paid, I think really for normal products will be an exception and not the rule. And you can look into other products. If you buy a television set or you buy a new sofa, you will also have advice in the stores or online or whatever, which you are not paying for if you don't choose to buy at the end of the day the article. So I think it is not bound only to the insurance world, that for simpler or mid-class products, a potential seller is willing to invest a certain amount of time and expertise to explain the product to the buyer. And here is, and that already answers a little bit what you say. Over time, I could expect that we will have the same situation as we have in the retail market. So if I want to buy margarine, no name margarine, I only look on the price and I don't want any advice. I know what margarine is about. But if I'm thinking of refurnishing my house and putting environmentally friendly and IoT things into the house, I probably need an engineer who will also get a fee. So I think very similar situation will happen. What that also means is that a small agent, and especially a multi-agent or a very small broker, who doesn't have anything specific to offer, will have over time a fate that will be negative. And we see already in Germany that small brokers are leaving, or small brokers are losing independence because they don't have enough knowledge, so they join a platform which gives them certain advice, but on the long run they will lose more or less their independence. On the other side, bound agents with specific product know-how have not necessarily flourished. What is difficult if we look at Germany, so please, if you look at figures from Germany, you have to be very careful because we have a revolution in the life insurance market, and we had one in the health insurance market. This was for brokers and agents the big income, and today health insurance is almost zero income for multi-agents. It's almost only bound agents that do it, and life insurance has dropped so significantly that this has led to a significant drop in numbers. So it has nothing to do with the IDD. But overall, I think it is like any other retail business, and I've seen it in my street. Two agencies have opened up new, so it's not losing out totally.
It's interesting that he refers to his street. Now you have to know that in Germany, when we started this process of harmonization on insurance intermediation, in Germany alone, there were 500,000 intermediaries. That means there were more intermediaries in Germany than in the rest of the European Union combined. And so that has, of course, the IDD and this trend towards professionalization in the advice to consumers has in Germany led to the disappearance of a large number of intermediaries. But you can already start by presuming that some of them were really not qualified to do the job and probably not a good service to the consumer.
Also, to comment on that one, there was a lot of people who were doing insurance sales as a side job.
Yes.
So professional
teachers, for instance.
teachers, you know, in a break, or state employees, or pensioners. So they had within their living room a little desk, and that was the agency. So if you take the professional people, it was 265,000 and has dropped now to 190,000. This is September 2018. So yes, but it's not half yet. No?
No, it was exceptional. Michael, how does it evolve in Austria? Is the number of smaller brokerages, firms, or agencies, are they disappearing?
I would like Professor van Hulle answer in a twofold way. First of all, I was mentioning yesterday that basically looking at the situation of implementation of IDD, where do we stand? I was mentioning this picture, I don't know if you remember, those who have been here, like being on a slack line somewhere over a valley. In the middle, I think that's where we are, and I think it's not serious, from my side, would not be serious now to comment anything about the implementation or the effects. I think we have to digest, take a breath, and look what will be the effect. So I think that's number one. I think also on the changes of the structures, it might be too early. Michael maybe has more insight from his professional experience in this way, but from an association point of view, I think this would be too early, and I think it would not be serious to judge anything right now. Second point is, however, of course, in our whole discussion, the effect would be expected, what Michael was mentioning, of course, that if you have high compliance costs, which is obvious, that smaller structures, that this will be more expensive for them in a disproportionate way, and of course that they will get into difficulties in terms of competition. Looking just in the fact, if you want to implement compliance, this huge amount of compliance, you have to hire well-specialized people. Those people are expensive. That's number one. If you don't have the capacities, you have to outsource, which is maybe even more expensive. In the end, so these are costs. If you're a small structure, you don't have the economies of scale to divide those costs. And if you, just from a theoretical point of view, I think the effect would be that there would be a reduction. What I also have to mention, I think the Austrian market in this sense is a little bit similar than the German ones. Like we also have, like we had in the past, teachers doing as a side job selling insurance policies, and I think also these models it will be difficult to continue those.
Paul, what do you think is the likely development in Romania? It may be too early to make any specific statements, but what do you think?
It's very difficult to predict, but I may say that we have an example in the past. When we increased the capital, minimum capital for the brokers, it was a six-fold increasing. And everybody on the news and even some association, they said they will destroy the intermediation. I was very interested in see how many insurers, brokers will disappear. At the end of the period, we saw that only 2% of the intermediation market disappeared. From 100% from the beginning of the process, and was 19%. Because most of the people that were not able to increase the capital, they were acquired by the brokers that were able to increase, and also all these networks, they were put it in their networks. On the other side, I may see that there is, I may say, an increasing interest for other companies to become distributors for different products. Of course, on the long run, only the adapters, the people, the companies that will run this bureaucratic process more and more automatically will survive. But I think this is very difficult to predict that how much this intermediation or this distribution will disappear. I cannot predict.
If I can continue on that issue, one of the basic questions here is, from a consumer protection point of view, do you believe that an insurance product, to sell an insurance product, requires for the consumer some sort of advice? Can you imagine that insurers would sell these products just without advice?
I think everybody, MTPL is difficult to discuss, but all other products, I think that even before trying to persuade the customers to buy new product, that they were given a bit of advice. Sometimes we are like in, I said before, like in a play of Molière, that a gentleman was spoken in prose, and he discovered that, oh, it's very interesting. So most of the time they give advices, but maybe if it's not written in a regulation, it's very difficult to separate. Sometimes in the description of a product, they give an advice about what's good or wrong in the product. Because I'm almost certain that most of the companies of the brokers that were surviving, they were surviving because they were, most of them, loyal to the customers. And they were interested in acquiring new customers for them and also for the insurers. So I think that in Romania, we are a customer with this. We are very advanced in what is calling professional training. Because if we look to the history, it's quite interesting that in the first directive, 1966, that was broken the borders for the for the intermediaries. That was a provision about the professional training. That was implemented in IMD, the first directive, that you have to have a professional training. But, and we insisted, if we continue this, if we insisted in order for the cross-selling to be well done, that this professional training to be recognized between the countries. We proposed this for IDD. Unfortunately, it disappeared. And I think that this will bring also a cooperation between, if we insisted, if this was provided in the directive, it will increase the cooperation between the NCAs and also having EOPA as a gathering center about what's happened in.
There is some of that is in the directive. There are requirements for professional education, but there was a lot of lobby against too strict rules for that. Michael, what do you think about advice and the role of intermediaries?
I think maybe here we have to distinguish between the advice in a legal term, where you have this whole process of documentation, where it's very with clear tick-the-box exercises, specified what you have to do and what you cannot do. I'm skeptical about this. On the other hand, I think it's in the nature of a good intermediary, of a successful intermediary, to build trust and to act, or at least to consult the customer and the client in his best interest. So I think this is for sure necessary. Talking about this, maybe we also have to talk about different classes of products. I think what we can already see over the last years with digitalization, you can see that you have some, let's say, easy products. Products where you don't need so much advice because they're quite simple, they don't differ so much from each other. And then of course you have products like life insurance products where per definition you need more consultancy or more advice. And I think this is also something we have to take into consideration when looking at this, particularly also when looking at this digitalization topic. Yeah.
Michael, what do you think?
Well, I think we also have to look, it's not only concluding the contract, the original contract. If I take an MTPL policy per se, when you don't have anything special, you know, if it's just according to the law, there is very little advice needed to conclude the contract. But on the contractual conclusion level, what happens if you have a parameter of how many kilometers you drive per year, and this changes? What happens if there is a restriction of the age of drivers and suddenly your son wants to drive? What happens if there is a small accident, etc.? So here the advice element comes along the duration of the contract. And here's the question, if you have everything in the front end without advice, let's say a pure internet solution, what would that mean for the advice along the contract, which is necessary? And another thing which is maybe a little bit different here in the territory, in almost all countries, also in Central, in Eastern Europe, there is a sales connect and a product connect between pure MTPL and other motor lines. So what is for many astonishing is that you sell Casco alone here, standalone, from MTPL. In some territories, it has been always comprehensive. So either you buy only MTPL or you buy one product, both, like in Britain. Or you have driver's accident insurance. So as long as you keep it very separate, there will be the risk that it will be disintegrated and the sales channels will lose the customer per se. Because the MTPL itself, I don't care. It's a victim, the third party that has a problem, not me. Yes? So I think it would be good for a healthy advice process and a fair process of sharing costs if there would be a liberalization and a more cross-selling ability for Casco business. Last not least, and advice, we see in Germany, but not only in Germany, that the aggregators that try with very strong marketing, they come under scrutiny. Yesterday was mentioned also by the McKinsey guys how great Hook 24 in Germany is. It's the only average price per policy, admin cost plus commissions in household is €9. In motor business, I think it's €7. So it's very, very, very efficient. And they have won case after case against the big aggregators of Germany, because the aggregators in Germany will be forced to say, hey, I'm getting €50, but by the way, if you can also choose Hook 24 and they only will take €6. So they will be more or less forced to tell them that they're expensive. And things like that will change in the sense that advice will be in. And last but not least, to sum that up, also in other retail, there is advice given. And it can be advice at the beginning, when you buy a product, if the product design is complicated, or it can be as a contract runs along. You know, if you have a let's say service contract for IoT of your house, then it's the main advice comes during the contract, not when you conclude the contract. I think it's very similar.
Unfortunately, we have to conclude our panel, but let me say something that I experienced when I was at the Commission. To my great surprise, when we talk about simple insurance products, I'm not sure whether people in this room are aware that people who do not know anything about insurance have no idea that there is a relationship between a risk and a premium. Most people do not know that the premium is higher when the risk is higher. And when I say most people, you can include your prime minister, your president, your king, your queen, or whatever you have. Even these people have no idea about that there is a linkage between a risk and a premium, which makes me tell that it's very important for you as intermediaries that you offer a service to your client, and to the extent that you, to your consumer, to your client, you can explain what he or she is buying in terms that the people understand, you will have a continued business. I think that's the message that you can take out of this panel. Let me thank the members of the panel for their contributions.